too much noise today. I just need the road, the rain, and the hum of the engine.
You know, I used to think that being a good person meant always being there for others, saying yes even when my gut screamed no, smiling when I wanted to cry, making everyone else comfortable, even if it meant setting myself on fire. And for a long time, I thought that was love. I thought it was strength. I thought it made me valuable. But deep down, something always felt off. Like I was playing a part in a script I never wrote. I would catch myself bending, reshaping, editing who I was, depending on who I was with. And yet, no matter how much I gave, it never felt like enough. No matter how hard I tried, I never quite felt seen or safe. One day, and I'll never forget this, I was standing in the kitchen, washing dishes, and I just broke down. Not because anything terrible had happened. Not because someone had said something cruel, but because I realized I didn't know what I wanted anymore. I couldn't remember the last time I had made a choice just for me, not because I thought it was what someone else needed or expected. That moment hit me like a wave, quiet but undeniable. And in the silence that followed, a question bubbled up from somewhere I hadn't dared to look before. What if I've been abandoning myself this whole time? Carl Jung talked a lot about the self, not the one we show the world, but the one buried beneath all the layers we put on to survive. He called this process of peeling it all back individuation. And let me tell you, it's messy, it's confronting, but it's the only way to stop living like a stranger in your own skin. We grow up learning to prioritize approval from our parents, our teachers, our peers. We're taught, often without words, that love is something to earn, that our worth depends on how useful, pleasing, or agreeable we are. So we adapt. We become what others want. And somewhere along the way, we start to believe that who we really are isn't enough. That belief burrows deep. It shows up in the way we apologize for things that aren't our fault, the way we minimize our needs, the way we tolerate relationships that drain us. We tell ourselves we're being kind, flexible, patient, but really, we're scared. Scared that if we stopped performing, we'd be left behind. I've had to face that fear over and over. Every time I tried to set a boundary, my chest would tighten. What if they think I'm selfish? What if they leave? What if I'm wrong? And yet, with each act of courage, each time I chose me, a tiny part of me came back to life, like I was slowly stitching myself back together. It wasn't some grand transformation. It started with small things, saying no without a 20-minute explanation, taking an afternoon off because I needed rest, not because I earned it, admitting I was hurt instead of pretending I was fine. And you know what? The world didn't collapse. The people who truly cared, they stayed. And the ones who didn't? Well, maybe they were only there because of the role I was playing. I think that's the scariest part. Realizing how much of your life was built around being acceptable rather than being real. But it's also the most freeing, because once you stop chasing validation, you start building something that actually feels like home. One of the hardest things I've learned is this. Choosing yourself doesn't mean rejecting others. It means refusing to abandon yourself for them. There's a difference. It's not about being self-centered. It's about being self-connected. Knowing your own voice well enough to recognize when it's being drowned out by the noise of expectations. And the thing is, the more you choose yourself, the more clearly you see. You start noticing how much of your anxiety isn't yours. It's the weight of trying to be who others want you to be. You start noticing when you're shrinking, when you're dimming your light, when you're giving out of guilt rather than love. That awareness changes everything. It's like you suddenly realize you've been holding your breath for years, and now you get to exhale. If any of this feels familiar to you, just know you're not broken. You're waking up. And waking up can feel like grief at first, grieving the version of you that tried so hard to be loved in all the wrong ways. But underneath that grief is something holy. It's the beginning of coming home to yourself. So if you're standing at that same edge I once stood at, wondering if it's okay to put yourself first, let me say it clearly, yes. Yes, it is. It's not selfish. It's sacred. Because the truth is, the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. And you deserve for it to be honest, kind, and whole. Let that be your starting point. There's something most people don't tell you when you begin this work, that the parts of yourself you've been avoiding don't go quietly. They don't just disappear because you've decided to be more authentic. No, they rise, loud, messy, demanding to be seen. I wasn't prepared for that. After I started setting boundaries and choosing myself, I expected things to get easier, but instead I was met with a storm of emotions I didn't even realize I'd been suppressing. Shame, fear, rage, grief. Not just about recent things, but about old wounds I thought I'd buried a long time ago. And that's when I first understood what Jung meant by the shadow. It's the part of you that you've hidden, sometimes so well that you forget it's even there. It holds all the things you've been told are unacceptable. Your anger, your desires, your vulnerabilities, your needs. It's where your inner child still cries for love in the middle of the night. It's where you stuffed your heartbreak and shame because there was no room for them in the world you were trying to survive in. And the moment you stop running from yourself, the moment you finally sit in stillness, the shadow shows up. Not to punish you, but to finally be acknowledged. I remember one night lying awake in bed, overwhelmed by this feeling of emptiness. Everything on the outside looked fine. My life wasn't falling apart. But inside, it felt like something was missing, like I was hollow. I couldn't explain it. That kind of ache you can't trace to any one thing. Just this heavy, constant hum of something's not right. That's the shadow, too. It whispers through your patterns. It repeats itself in your relationships. It hijacks your thoughts and sabotages your peace. And until you're willing to meet it, you keep living the same story. Different characters, same pain. For a while, I tried to distract myself. I stayed busy, said I was fine, told myself I was healing. But healing isn't about being busy. It's about being brutally honest. And honestly, I was scared. Scared of what I'd find if I looked too closely. But that fear was a compass. It was pointing me toward what needed love the most. You see, everything you've disowned in yourself doesn't vanish. It waits. It shows up in self-sabotage, in anxiety, in the voice that says, "You're too much," or "not enough." And it's not your enemy. It's your pain asking for permission to come home. I had to learn to stop judging those parts of me. The anger that flared when I felt unseen. The jealousy that surfaced when someone had what I secretly craved. The sadness that clung to me on quiet mornings. For so long, I tried to fix or ignore these feelings. But they didn't need fixing. They needed holding. That changed everything. Because when I stopped labeling my emotions as bad or wrong, I started hearing what they were really trying to say. My anger said, "You deserve to be treated better." My sadness said, "You've been carrying this too long." My fear said, "Please don't abandon me again." And when I listened, really listened, I felt something shift, like the parts of me that had been waiting in the dark for years were finally stepping into the light. Slowly, hesitantly, but they were there. This isn't the kind of transformation people post about on Instagram. It's raw, private, sometimes ugly, but it's real. And in its realness, there's power, because once you face your shadow, it stops controlling you. It no longer has to scream through breakdowns or outbursts or chronic exhaustion. It no longer sabotages your joy. It becomes a guide, a mirror, a reminder that wholeness isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. We all carry things we were never meant to carry alone. And somewhere along the way, we convinced ourselves that to be loved, we had to be easy, light, polished. But the truth is, the people who truly love you, they don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to be real. And you need that from yourself too. I'm still meeting parts of me I didn't know existed, still unlearning, still making room for the forgotten corners of my soul. But now, instead of running from my darkness, I hold its hand. I ask what it needs. I remind it, you're safe now, because I've finally chosen to stay, not just with the version of me that's kind and calm and productive, but with the one who's angry, scared, tired, and still learning how to feel worthy of love. That's what choosing yourself really means. It's not a single act. It's a daily return, a constant remembering that all of you belongs, not just the parts that make others comfortable. All of you. The hardest part wasn't realizing I had abandoned myself. It was seeing all the ways I had let others do it too. That was a punch to the gut. When you start to wake up, really wake up, you can't unsee the patterns. You begin to notice the people who only loved the version of you that didn't need anything. The ones who disappeared the moment you had boundaries. The way you smiled through being dismissed. The way you stayed quiet to keep the peace. The way you gave, not because you were generous, but because you were afraid of being left. And maybe the worst part is realizing you taught them how to treat you. Not out of weakness, not because you were stupid or naive, but because somewhere along the way, you learned that love is something you earn by disappearing a little more each day. That realization nearly broke me. I remember sitting on the floor, surrounded by the quiet chaos of my own thoughts, and thinking, how did I get here? I had shaped my life around making sure everyone else was okay, that they were comfortable, that they felt seen. But me, I was a ghost in my own story. And then it hit me. Healing isn't just about feeling better. It's about facing everything you let slide. It's about grieving the version of you that tolerated too much. The one who stayed when she should have walked away. The one who smiled through tears, laughed through loneliness, apologized for simply existing. That grief is real, and it deserves space. Because once you start choosing yourself, people will leave. They'll say you've changed, and they're right. You're no longer willing to betray yourself for a seat at their table. You're no longer performing the role they were comfortable with, and not everyone can handle that. Some people will fade out gently, others will slam the door. Some will try to guilt you back into being who you were. They'll say you're selfish, difficult, unrecognizable, and it'll hurt deeply, because for a while, you'll question yourself. You'll wonder if you're making a mistake. You'll miss them, even the ones who hurt you, because familiarity has a way of convincing us it's love. But here's the truth, it's not your job to make others comfortable at your own expense. Every time you silence your needs, you confirm the lie that you're too much. Every time you stay in a space that shrinks you, you reinforce the belief that you don't deserve more. And every time you pretend to be okay with what breaks your heart, you push yourself further away. I had to learn that some endings are sacred, that not all losses are tragedies. Some are invitations, an invitation to reclaim your voice, to rebuild your identity, to finally make space for the kind of relationships that nourish, not deplete. But it doesn't happen overnight. At first, the loneliness is unbearable. The silence after the noise of constant compromise can be deafening. You'll be tempted to go back, to reach out, to explain yourself, to make it easier for them to accept the new you. Don't shrink to make someone else feel big. Don't water yourself down for people who never intended to see your depth. Don't apologize for evolving. You're not being dramatic. You're not overreacting. You're healing. And healing often looks like chaos before it looks like peace. There was a point where I realized, with both heartbreak and relief, that some people loved me because I didn't love myself. I was easy to keep around because I asked for so little, because I didn't challenge their comfort, because I made it easy to take without ever needing to give. And when I stopped doing that, when I finally chose me, they left. And I had to let them. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally cared enough about myself to stop settling. There's grief in that, deep grief. But there's also freedom, because every time someone leaves when you choose yourself, you create room for something real, something reciprocal, something that doesn't require you to abandon your truth for the sake of connection. And slowly things begin to shift. You start to feel stronger in your no's, more grounded in your yeses. You begin to trust that your needs aren't burdens but beacons, that your boundaries aren't walls but bridges to something healthier. You stop explaining yourself. You stop begging to be seen. You stop clinging to what was never meant to stay. And most of all, you stop apologizing for existing in your fullness. The people who are meant for you, they won't need you to dim. They'll meet you in your truth. They'll honor your light and your shadow. They'll love the you that isn't always easy or agreeable or polished, because they're doing their own work too. And when two people meet in wholeness, there's nothing more powerful. But to get there, you have to pass through the fire of letting go. Let it burn. Let it clear the space. You're not losing people. You're finding yourself. There's a strange moment that happens somewhere in the middle of it all. After the grief, after the loss, after the unraveling, when the noise quiets and the world around you stops reacting, you wake up one day and realize how quiet everything has become. At first, the silence feels like loneliness, a kind of emptiness that creeps in when the distractions are gone and the old roles have fallen away. No more messages from people who only wanted the easy version of you. No more invitations to places where you used to pretend to belong. Just space. Wide, unfamiliar space. And it's terrifying. You don't know who you are yet. You've let go of the person you were, but the person you're becoming hasn't fully arrived. You're floating between stories, too far from the shore to go back, but not close enough to see where you're headed. This is the void, and no one warns you about it. Jung called it the dark night of the soul, and now I understand why. It's not dramatic or violent. It's quiet, hollow. It's that moment when all the lights go out and you're left to feel everything you've spent your life trying to outrun. The silence echoes. The stillness forces you to meet yourself in a way you never have before. I remember one afternoon. I had just come home from running errands, and as I closed the door behind me, I felt it, that eerie quiet. No one to perform for, no messages to check, no plans, no noise, no excuses, just me, sitting with myself. And I realized I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know what made me feel alive. So much of my identity had been wrapped around other people's needs, moods, expectations. Without all of that, who was I? I wish I could tell you I had a revelation, some grand insight that made everything better, but I didn't. I just sat there. I cried a little. I made some tea. I stared out the window, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't try to fix the emptiness. I just let it be. And that, quietly, subtly, was the beginning of everything, because that space, that uncomfortable silence, held something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. When you're no longer wrapped in survival, when you're no longer chasing love or approval or status, you finally have the freedom to ask, what do I actually want? And not in the abstract Instagram inspirational way. I mean deep down. What makes your soul exhale? What lights you up? What does peace feel like in your body? At first, I didn't know how to answer. So I started small. I played music I used to love but had forgotten about. I took walks without a destination. I let myself sleep in. I cooked meals just for me. I wrote things no one else would ever read. And slowly, in those quiet moments, I began to remember myself. I remembered that I loved rainy mornings, that I cried at certain songs, that silence didn't have to be scary. It could be sacred. I realized I didn't need to fill every moment, that just being was enough. And that was the real awakening. The void, it turns out, isn't empty at all. It's full of all the parts of you that were waiting for your attention, your inner child, your forgotten dreams, your unmet needs, your quiet desires. All of it lives there, patiently waiting for you to come back. Most people try to skip this part. They jump from one distraction to the next. A new job, a new relationship, a new goal. But if you can stay here even for a little while, if you can breathe through the discomfort and listen closely, you'll find something most people never touch, the unshakable truth of who you are when no one's watching. That's where freedom lives, not in doing whatever you want, whenever you want, but in knowing you no longer need to chase anything to feel whole. This part of the journey is quiet. It's not glamorous. There's no applause. But it's where you begin to feel the shift, from seeking to settling into yourself. You stop trying to be understood by people who were never meant to understand you. You stop craving validation like oxygen. You begin to trust your own voice, your own rhythms. And slowly, a sense of peace rises, not because everything is perfect, but because you've stopped abandoning yourself. And that's everything. So if you're here, in this quiet, in-between place, don't rush it. Don't try to fill it. Just stay. Let it hold you. Let yourself grieve, rest, dream. Let yourself become. Because something beautiful happens in the void. You stop being who the world told you to be, and you begin to remember who you were before the world told you to forget. Something started shifting in me, and at first I didn't even notice. It wasn't some big, dramatic moment. It was subtle, like the way seasons change, one leaf at a time. I just started feeling different, lighter, like I wasn't dragging the same invisible weight everywhere I went. And then it hit me. I wasn't reacting the way I used to. That text that would have made my chest tighten. Now it was just a message. That comment that would have sent me spiraling into self-doubt. I let it pass. The old urge to over-explain, over-justify, over-give. It was still there, but softer, easier to ignore. I wasn't performing anymore. I was responding from a place of wholeness, from a place of choice. You know how they say healing isn't linear? It's true, it's chaotic and strange and non-linear as hell. But what they don't always say is that at a certain point, the healing begins to show, not in your thoughts, but in your reactions. Your nervous system starts to settle. You stop being on high alert all the time. You stop trying to fix everyone and everything. You let people have their opinions without feeling the need to defend yourself. You stop entering every room wondering how to earn your place. You already know you belong. It's a kind of groundedness that can't be faked. A quiet confidence that says, I know who I am now and I'm okay with it. That doesn't mean you're never triggered. You are. You just meet those triggers with more compassion. You pause before you spiral. You breathe before you react. You give yourself the grace to mess up without collapsing into shame. And it's in those tiny, quiet moments that you realize this is what it means to live differently. This is what it means to choose yourself. It's not about being loud or defiant. It's not about burning every bridge or shouting your truth from the rooftops. Sometimes it's just about staying silent when silence is peace. Sometimes it's about saying no and not explaining why. Sometimes it's about walking away from what once felt like your whole world. Not because you don't care anymore, but because you finally do. I think that's the real shift. Care starts flowing inward. You begin to care more about how you feel than how you look. You care more about your inner peace than your outer image. You care more about being aligned than being liked. And the world responds to that. The people who used to drain you don't reach out as often. Or maybe they do, but you don't feel the pull anymore. The situations that used to throw you off course lose their grip. You begin to see clearly what's for you and what never was. You start filtering everything through a new lens. Does this feel true to me? It's not about being right. It's about being real. I stopped saying yes out of guilt. I stopped forcing myself into conversations where I wasn't heard. I stopped overextending just to prove my worth. And the space that opened up, it was sacred. That space is where I found joy again. Not the loud, performative kind, but the soft, quiet kind that comes when your life finally feels like yours. And I won't lie, not everyone celebrated this new version of me. Some people pulled away. Some questioned me. Some tried to pull me back into old dynamics, but I didn't go. Not because I didn't love them, but because I finally loved me more, and that changed everything. People often ask, how do you know when you're healing? And I think the answer is this. You start to feel safe inside yourself. You stop fearing your own emotions. You stop needing constant noise. You stop begging life to make sense. And instead, you start living it as it is. You come home. And home isn't some perfect place. It's a feeling. A soft landing inside your own skin. It's waking up and not dreading the mirror. It's making choices without second-guessing your intuition. It's knowing that even on your messiest days, you are still enough. So if you're starting to notice that shift, even if it's small, even if it's quiet, trust it. That's your soul realigning. That's the universe reflecting your new vibration. And the more you honor it, the more ease you'll find. The more you'll attract people and experiences that mirror this new energy. Not because you're trying to manifest them, but because you've become someone who no longer tolerates less. You've raised the bar, not just for others, but for yourself. Not in a punishing way, in a loving way, in a you deserve to feel good and safe and whole kind of way. That's the work. That's the reward. And it's only just beginning. What they don't tell you about choosing yourself is that life will test you over and over, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity, to see if you're really anchored in the person you've become, or if you're still tempted to slide back into who you used to be. And sometimes those tests come dressed as everything you once thought you wanted. An old flame suddenly reaching out, a familiar opportunity dangling in front of you, a conversation where someone pushes your boundaries just slightly, waiting to see if you'll fold like before, a moment where it would be so easy to say yes, to go back, to shrink, to perform. And in those moments, something powerful happens. You pause. You feel it in your body first, the tightening in your chest, the subtle discomfort in your gut. You recognize the pattern, the old impulse. But this time, you don't react on autopilot. You breathe, you feel the urge, and you choose differently. That's when you know you've changed. And it's not about being perfect. There are still days when I catch myself slipping, still moments where I doubt, where I crave the comfort of old habits. But the difference now is that I don't stay there. I notice, I forgive, I realign. And that's everything. Because healing isn't about never being triggered. It's about learning not to abandon yourself when you are. There was a day not long ago when I ran into someone from my past, someone who used to take up a lot of space in my heart. The kind of person who knew exactly how to get under my skin, how to make me question myself. For a moment, the old pull returned, that familiar ache, that voice whispering maybe this time will be different. But it wasn't. They hadn't changed. They didn't see me. Not really. They still wanted the version of me who would bend, who would make them feel whole at the expense of my own wholeness, and I couldn't give that anymore. I smiled. I wished them well, and I walked away. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with peace, because I finally understood that not every reconnection is a sign. Sometimes it's a checkpoint, a quiet question from life. Are you still choosing you? And I was. That moment stayed with me, not because it was dramatic, but because it was different, because I didn't lose myself in it, because I didn't need to be right or vindicated or wanted. I just needed to be true, and I was. That's what this part of the journey is about, the integration, the part where your choices start to align with your healing, where you don't have to think so hard about what's right for you. You just know, because you've spent enough time listening to yourself, being with yourself, trusting yourself. You've built a new foundation, one that doesn't shake when old storms return. But here's the truth. The world won't always applaud your growth. Some people will miss the version of you who was easier to manipulate. Some will try to drag you back with guilt, with nostalgia, with carefully crafted words that hit where it still hurts. They'll say, "You've changed." And you'll say, "Yes, I have." And you'll mean it, because the person you're becoming is softer and stronger, quieter and more powerful. Not because you've mastered life, but because you've stopped fighting with yourself. There's a peace that comes from choosing yourself so many times you stop questioning whether you're allowed to. A quiet authority that grows when you realize your worth was never up for debate. And with that peace comes a whole new kind of clarity. You start to see the patterns that once blinded you. You feel the energy behind people's words, not just the words themselves. You recognize manipulation for what it is. You spot red flags before they become fires. You no longer stay just because someone needs you. You stay when it's mutual, when it's respectful, when it's true. That's the difference. You no longer trade pieces of yourself for a connection. You've become the home you used to search for in others. And yes, the tests will keep coming, because growth isn't a finish line. It's a lifelong path. But now you walk that path with your head up and your heart open. You don't hide your scars. You don't apologize for your needs. You don't shrink for anyone. You walk tall, not because life is easy now, but because you finally carry yourself with love. And that changes everything. There's a moment, and maybe it sneaks up on you, or maybe it arrives all at once when you finally feel it. The shift from survival to presence. The moment you stop holding your breath and realize you've been breathing deeply, fully, without fear for days now, weeks even. It's subtle, almost anticlimactic. No fireworks, no applause. Just this gentle inner knowing. I'm okay. Not because everything in your life is perfect. Far from it. Things still go wrong. People still disappoint you. Doubt still shows up. But something in you has changed. You're not lost in it anymore. You don't spiral the way you used to. You don't crumble every time something cracks. You bend, sure, but you don't break. Because now you know who you are. And that knowing, it's unshakable. You don't chase closure. You don't try to rewrite the past. You don't beg for understanding from people who never cared to understand you in the first place. You've made peace with the fact that some people will never see you clearly. And that's not your burden to carry. The burden was never the people, really. It was the stories you told yourself about what their love meant about your worth. And now that those stories have unraveled, you're free. Free to write new ones. Free to build a life that isn't stitched together from obligation, fear, and inherited beliefs. Free to love without losing yourself. Free to say no without guilt. Free to walk away without collapse. Free to rest without apology. That freedom, it's not loud, it's not defiant. It's not about declaring anything to anyone. It's in the way you wake up and no longer dread the day ahead. It's in how you look in the mirror and no longer flinch. It's in the way your body feels less like a battleground and more like a home. And yes, the old world will try to call you back. It'll come disguised as old habits, old people, old thoughts. It'll whisper, "Are you sure? Aren't you being too much, too different, too selfish?" And you'll smile, because now you recognize that voice. You know it's fear. You know it's the echo of a past self, still learning to trust the new one. And you'll answer it gently. "I've got this now." Not perfectly, not always gracefully, but fully, presently, honestly, because you've learned to sit with your feelings instead of outsourcing your worth. You've learned to navigate discomfort without abandoning yourself. You've learned that peace doesn't mean the absence of problems. It means you no longer feel like you're drowning in them. That's what real healing does. It brings you home to yourself. And from that place, that inner rootedness, everything else begins to change. Relationships become cleaner, not easier, but clearer. You stop attracting chaos disguised as passion. You stop choosing people who love your potential but can't hold your truth. You stop betraying yourself just to be chosen. You choose you, not once but every day in 100 quiet ways, and the universe starts to mirror that choice back to you. Not always instantly, not always in the way you imagined, but slowly, softly, life begins to meet you in your fullness. Opportunities arise that feel aligned. People enter your world who feel safe. Peace becomes your default, not a fleeting reward. You stop trying to prove your value and start living from it. And perhaps the most beautiful part, you begin to see the meaning in everything that led you here. All the heartbreaks, the silence, the dark nights, the messy middles. You stop wishing they hadn't happened. You start understanding why they did. Not to punish you, to prepare you, because without those cracks, the light wouldn't have found a way in. And now you're the light, not for everyone. And that's okay. You're not here to be everything to everyone. You're here to be real, to be whole, to be you. And that, in this world, that's rare. That's powerful. That's enough. So keep choosing yourself. Again and again, until it's no longer a decision, but a way of being.
If this felt meaningful to you, it might mean something to someone else too. So hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. That's how YouTube knows to share it with others. Maybe together, we can help someone see things a little differently.